today we're going to be talking specifically about manifesting your perfect soulmate. So as I was sharing with you, Hemal, before we started the call, most of the women here on this event are single women who would like to have a relationship with the man of their dreams, would like to have a loving, committed relationship. And I might say that many of them, like myself, have not exactly had the smoothest path to love. Hit a few speed bumps and potholes along the way, so to speak. So I'm excited about what you have to share with us and excited about insights that you can offer to the ladies out there who might be feeling a little bit frustrated, disappointed, or not feeling like they're manifesting in this area of life.
Yeah, it's interesting what you said there, and that makes sense in terms of we've all been through various journeys in our life, whether it be in the relationship arena or any other area, whether it's business or whatever else. But certainly when it comes to relationships, which are often generally tend to be close to our hearts, which tend to emotionally bruise us a bit more and take us something a bit longer to recover from, maybe a way to soothe that is to actually say, well, actually, what if everything that you've been through has been there to serve you in terms of your own evolution? So rather than it being about whether you were married or in a relationship and it worked out, didn't work out, etc., but what if actually you went into that because of certain aspects that were within you, in terms of there was a certain reason, I wouldn't say, well, you did attract it, but there were certain choices that you made to go into that, and then whether it worked out, and I'm presuming maybe it didn't work out if you're here single and looking for something else. So what if it was there to serve you in some way? Because at that time, your evolution guided you to that relationship. Well, where you were at guided you to that relationship, and you made certain choices. So, and those choices didn't work out. Maybe you picked the wrong person. Maybe you were looking for the wrong things and attracted the wrong. So in a sense, there were certain insights and certain reflections of your own evolution at that time. So maybe that's a more objective and a more constructive way of looking at it, rather than beating ourselves up over our past choices. So in a sense, you've learned from that. You've evolved. You're here now, basically. You're looking for better. So in a sense, what I would say is look back at what's happened and look at what can I take from this? What can I learn from this? What can I let go of? What choices would I make differently? And also what I would suggest is if you want to manifest something from the heart, you want to come from the heart. You don't want to hide the heart away and protect it and be wounded and operate from that place, because you're probably going to attract people that are in that same space. Oftentimes I work with women who, for example, will say, well, I keep attracting men who don't want to commit. There's just no men out there that want to commit. And I'll often say, well, let's find out, let's dig a bit deeper. And then as we explore it and we find, I'll ask them the question, how do you feel about commitment? What if today or tomorrow you were going to meet someone potentially for the rest of your life? How does that feel? And if we dig a bit deeper, usually we'll find that there's some sort of concern or subtle fear there. And so what's been happening is, whilst they themselves had that fear, they were subconsciously attracting the wrong men who didn't want to commit because they had their own fear. So it wasn't the men that were fearful of commitment, or maybe they were, but it was more of a reflection of their own, because they didn't want to attract the ones that would commit because they were scared of commitment themselves in those examples. So usually let's look within ourselves. So you don't want to be too wounded. You don't want to be protective of the heart, because again, if you want an authentic relationship, very affectionate, loving, you want to come from that energy. So explore where are you at in relation to all of that. Is there any hesitation about any of that? So explore, and then that's the key word. Sometimes people will say, oh, Hemal, I'm ready for a relationship. I know what I want. Okay, so is there any hesitation for anything? Whether it's commitment, if you're looking for a long-term relationship, whether it's marriage, whatever it might be, when you think about that, when you think about having someone for the rest of your life, is that totally without any hesitation? If there's even a slight hesitation, explore that. That's what you want to explore. That's going to give you some clues to look into more deeply.
Wow, there's so much there that really stood out for me as being so significant and important. One of the things that you said that really, really touched me was the way you started, where you said, what if everything you've experienced up to this point has been there to serve you? I can recall, I shared with you, my husband and I met and married when I was 43, he was 38. And we both had what felt like a long and winding journey to love, with, as I mentioned, a few speed bumps and roads that we traveled that felt hard or difficult or frustrating or painful. And we've talked often since about how, as we look back on it now, and of course it's easier to say that now, but as we look back on it now, how we can really see that all of those experiences really did serve us and helped us to be in a place where we were ready to see and receive each other and to be ready for the love that we now share. And of course, going through it at the time, it didn't feel that way, but in perspective now, in hindsight, we can see that. And I do believe that we're sent experiences and people into our lives that bring us lessons. And I guess all of that can be looked upon in some ways as a gift, even though it might not feel like it when we're going through it, right?
Yeah. Absolutely. It's like sometimes we've got our egos and our masks that we're hiding behind, and sometimes we're sent, I won't say sent things, but we attract things to kind of help us deal with our masks. If we're operating behind a mask, we'll often tend to attract people that will also be operating from a mask, and then we get disappointed that they're not being authentic when we need to maybe explore within ourselves, where are we at? So sometimes we begrudgingly attach ourselves to concepts and things, and we don't let go of those, which we actually need to let go of to allow the free flowingness to attract what we really want to have, basically. So sometimes we get things in life which make us reflect and shed some things that actually don't serve us, that we need to let go of as well. So sometimes that's what also is an insight and a learning, which is actually letting go of certain things that we're holding on to in terms of fears, attachments, conflicts, etc. And so we attract the people that aren't ideal for us because they're reflecting that back. And eventually, because we haven't dealt with it within ourselves, we attract the outer reflection, which is more magnified and bigger on a physical level. And so when we deal with what's within us, we then start to attract new things coming into our life very, very, very quickly. Something you said, which is also can be used as a method. You said about you and your husband, how you look back on things now as to how things turned out and how many things were actually blessings. And I actually agree. I totally agree with that I think everything is a blessing and a gift. It's just that we don't see it that way. And sometimes we don't realize it until later in time when we ourselves evolve and we shift our perspective such that we can see it. Too often we're really close to the trees. We get bark burn, so to speak. And we're so close to the trees that we don't realize it, and we need to sort of step back and realize. And that's often what happens with time and relationships, where at the time we feel heartbroken, we feel disappointed, rejected, hurt. And again, that's the unshedding of certain things, whether it's rejection, fear, etc., etc. Because again, if you totally accept yourself, you can't really truly be rejected by another, in the sense that someone may choose not to be with you, but you're not going to feel the pain if you're accepting yourself. Usually it's reflecting our own inner pain, whether it's abandonment or rejection of ourselves or something else. That's what it's connecting to. So usually generally it's always our emotional wounds that's where the hurt's coming from. It's actually not the other. So when someone does something, if you don't have those emotional wounds there, you won't be affected. You'll just be moving on, and it'll just be one of those things, and you'll move on, basically. You won't think too much into it. So when we feel hurt, when we feel rejected, let down, abandoned, again, that's giving us feedback about what's within us, within ourselves. And going back to what I was saying, so what I was about to say, when you said like you and your husband would look back and see things differently. So everyone watching this, if they want a process or a technique, think about it this way. If you think about where you are now, there are certain things you look back on in your life now that you might look back and go, that totally makes sense. And it might be 5 years ago, 10 years ago, whatever, a year ago, 20 years ago. You look back and go, now I realize why I went through that. So what you could do is you could actually go into the future. And let's say 10 years from now, or 15 or 20 years, look back from there and say, okay, so from the future, you've got everything that you want, whether it's a relationship, the life, the career, everything that you want. So you're in that energy, okay? And so then you look back to where you are now and say, okay, what insights could I give the younger you? What does she need to know about what will help her? What does she need to let go of? What does she need to take on board to attract what's really authentic for her? Because by going into the future and stepping into the energy of what you want, so that's the important part, also stepping into the energy of what you want, how it feels to have that relationship that you want, the career and everything else that you want. So if you've got everything that you want, you're now in that energy. Oftentimes, as we go through our lives, when we feel hurt or rejected, we're in the energy of what we don't want. And so we filter through that, and the insights we get reflect that. It reflects our fears. So get into the energy of what you do want. So go into the future, for example, and look back and say, okay, what advice would I give the younger you, as in the younger you that's here and now? What advice would you give her? What would you suggest she does? What would you suggest she doesn't do? Just by getting into that energy, you'll elevate your own vibration. And so when we elevate our own vibration, we start to get the insights, we get synchronicities that happen. And the key thing is to stay in that vibration, stay in that energy. too often we go back to old patterns like, we feel let down, we wonder why things didn't work out, we look back on the past. But of course, if you know the future is all set for you, it's going to work out, whether it's 5 years, 10 years, whatever it might be. Not to say that you're going to have to wait 10 years or anything. I'm just saying that, let's say, a point in time when you know that you've got what you want. So it could happen 3 months from now, but it'll still mean 10 years from now you've got everything that you want, basically. So, but the key thing is you're in the energy of it. It doesn't really matter what time frame. The key thing is you feel the energy of it, and you're passing those insights and that energy back to the now. And so then you're operating from that energy in the now. And so that's the key thing. Stay in that energy. Don't turn into focus on rejection or why you've been let down or why it didn't work out, or maybe someone that you really liked and it didn't work out and you're thinking, well, will I find someone again? So that's focusing on lack. The universe is abundant. So if you're focusing on why didn't it work out, I would have been so happy if he'd have stayed or whatever else. So notice there's an element of scarcity there, and the universe is not scarce. It's just our own beliefs are. And the universe can bring something as good. It may even be that person, or it may be something else. I would say let go of it, allow the universe to do what it does. When you're attached to one particular form of it, you're now saying to the universe, me on a conscious ego level know exactly what I want. But of course, maybe they're not right for you. If you're with someone and it's not worked out, maybe there's a reason why not. Maybe energetically they're pointing in a different direction to where you are. So in a sense, I would say trust the universe, but focus on the essences of what you want, the qualities of what you want. Let the universe take care of the how. So the qualities as in love, affection, whatever it might be. What do you want to feel when you're in this wonderful relationship? And then let the universe orchestrate the how, whether it's that person or someone new, and it'll create whatever it needs to bring it about.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's so beautiful. And again, there's so much there. There's so much there that I could comment on. One of the things that really stood out again was when you said, when we feel hurt, it's really because someone leaves or something doesn't work out or whatever. What's really happening is it's triggering maybe our own abandonment issues or our own feeling of scarcity or lack or that sort of thing. And I think that's so profound and so important. And then this idea that the world is really abundant. But I want to play devil's advocate just for a second, if I can. Is that okay?
Absolutely, please do.
So, in a friendly way. I know there's women out there that may be hearing this, because I've been there myself in the past, where they're saying, okay, this sounds good, but doesn't feel like it's abundant. The world is abundant, at least when it comes to quality men out there. Maybe it's been a very long time since a woman has spent any time or attracted anyone into her life. Maybe it feels like it's a complete lack, a complete area of lack in her life. So if there are people out there that are feeling that way, that are just saying, well, this all sounds really good, but it doesn't feel real to me. It doesn't feel like this is what I'm experiencing. Then how would someone start? Where would someone begin to start addressing some of that?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Yeah. So if you're feeling, you hear that the universe is apparently abundant, but you're not experiencing it. What I would say is explore at the moment how you're feeling. My guess is oftentimes when we tend to experience something like that, usually there might be fear, there might be conflicts, we might be looking at things that we don't want. So again, are you focusing on the lack of things, what's not worked out, what's not in your life, etc., or are you focusing on the presence of things? So the love that you have, whether it's for people around you, family, pets, just where is your energy overall? But if I was to simplify it in terms of giving you like a step or steps in terms of how to move forward, what I would say is this. First of all, just, for example, say to yourself, what would I really like? And just get an idea of someone, it doesn't have to be anyone specific, but just to get an idea of what you would really like. How would you feel if he showed up in your life today or tomorrow, okay? How does that feel? Just imagine it for real. If he shows up, how does that feel, okay? Then notice your reaction to it. What reaction comes up for you? And that's going to give you a clue as to where you're at. So if your reaction is, oh, but it's not out there, there's a clue, basically. So these are your beliefs about your reality. I'll give you an example. I was working with a client, and this exact scenario is actually one that applied for her. She said, we'd actually done a bit of work, and she said, but Hemal, I'm not finding, we've done different work in different areas of our life, so things have moved in all sorts of different ways, and this was something that we were coming back to in terms of relationships. And she said, Hemal, but I'm just finding that there aren't men showing up. So I said to her, well, what if a guy showed up in your life today for something that you really, really, really want? She said, well, you have to be really, really attractive and someone I have a real connection with. I said, okay, really attractive, real connection with. So get into the vibe of what you want, not something that just for the sake of it, but something that you really want. And she said, okay, that feels good. I said, okay, so what if he showed up in your life today, in your office, or you just happened to bump into him? And she thought about it, and then she realized, you know what? She said, if I met him, my fear would be that he won't ask me out, or if we had a relationship, that he would reject me or he would leave me. So that was so I said to her, what's happening is you're actually subconsciously avoiding having that, avoiding seeing someone like that in your life, because there's a risk that they'll reject you, or that you'll be in a relationship and they'll leave you. And so you want to avoid that pain. So you're actually avoiding the men altogether. That's why you're not seeing them, basically. So usually it's our fears where it's in a sense, we've got a vested interest not to meet this because we're scared of getting hurt or whatever else. So that's what I would explore. If it's not showing up, what if this scenario, this person shows up in your life? What are you scared of? What does it conflict with? Do you think that if a man shows up, ideal for you, it's going to conflict with something else? Is it that, let's say you've got children from a previous relationship and you think it's going to conflict with that? Doesn't mean that it will. It's that the fact that you think it. That's the key thing. Mm-hmm. So it's not the fact that it will. It's just, so that's what we're doing here. Remember, the universe is abundant. Your children could absolutely love a new guy in your life, for example, even if they're telling you they won't. It's all energetic. Once you change your energy, you'll find people and things will change around you. So again, it's really about how you're thinking about things. That's what's affecting it. So it's not the fact that it will be that way. So I would say, if someone showed up in your life, what comes up? What are the fears about it? Is it about getting hurt? Is it about reminding you of the past? Is it conflicting with something else? Does it conflict with your children or your parents or your family? Do you think that? And then again, it may come into self-esteem stuff. Is it about how you feel about yourself? Do you feel worthy? Do you feel you deserve someone, etc., etc.? So just see naturally what comes up in your thinking. What you could do is get a piece of paper and just start writing your thoughts that come up about having someone come into your life. How does it feel? What are your worst fears? What are your concerns? Everything that comes up is there. So you want to then look into that and address that.
Mm-hmm. This so resonates because I think so often there are fears, there's ambivalence,
yeah.
There's all kinds of things going on that actually are creating blocks, or we've built such a protective barrier around ourselves that we become our own shields, and we can't really receive love even if it were available to us.
Yeah.
And so a lot of times when I'm speaking with or talking with women, and we talk about what they'd really like to have, and we talk about what they think may be slowing them down, mm-hmm. or standing in the way, there are things that come up that, there is some ambivalence. Maybe a woman's afraid she's going to lose some independence or some autonomy.
Yes.
She's afraid she's going to have to compromise in ways that she doesn't want to compromise. Etc. Even though she's saying she deeply wants a relationship, yeah. There's this ambivalence, there are these fears. The tricky part, I think, about this is that sometimes these things are more on a subconscious level. Like we're not fully aware that they're operating. I think of it sometimes like with a computer. You've got the hard drive, which is really running the whole show, but we don't really see it. It's in there, it's doing its thing, running the whole show, but we don't really see it. And I think it's kind of like that for us as human beings.
The clue I would say is notice how it feels. So the feeling will be like a composite of all that you're thinking behind the scenes, basically. So earlier when you said like someone saying, but all this, I've heard about the universe being abundant, but I'm not experiencing it, or I don't feel it. So the feeling will give you some clues. It could be some fears. It could be that you don't want to see the universe as abundant because you fear getting hurt if it is, maybe. So again, it's just exploring. So the feelings that you have in relation to these questions, that's going to give you like the composite, the net sort of result of the thinking behind it. So then you explore, why am I feeling this way? What am I believing so as to feel this way? What am I not believing? Do I believe I'm going to get hurt? Do I believe there are no quote unquote loyal men out there, etc., etc.? So what are you focusing on? So again, if you're focusing on there aren't any loyal or committed men out there, why are you choosing to believe that? So I'm saying to you, the universe is abundant. There are loyal, committed, lovely guys out there, as there are lovely women out there. So it's an abundant universe. So why are you focusing on that? So too often with beliefs, what happens is we live from our beliefs so heavily that we don't realize they're even beliefs. So we just say, well, those aren't beliefs. That's just the way it is. That's we're so sunk into our beliefs we don't even realize it. So when you say something like, well, there really aren't, all the men I've actually had this. I worked with a client last year who said to me, and she wanted to attract a soulmate, and from the very first conversation, she said, well, I want to attract a soulmate, but I know men are not trustworthy. You just cannot trust them. And she was a very strong woman, and she has some very strong beliefs about this. And I said to her, look, we're going to go forward with this, but you do realize we're going to have to help you with this, basically. Because she had some very strong beliefs. Because she said, every man, whether it's my father, she said, whether it's every relationship I've had, it's always been about men who let me down in some way. And so as we did our work together, what we discovered, and this is usually the case, I said to her, now, that's fair enough what you've experienced with men, but maybe you've attracted those because of what you were vibrating on a deeper level. That's why you kept attracting the wrong type of men, whether it's your father or male friends or whatever else. And that's what we found, and she totally agreed afterwards. And she shifted that. We helped her shift that thinking. Then she was trying to attract nice, attractive men in her life, basically. So, and that totally shifted. Then she found that people were nicer to her because her own energy had shifted. So really, in what you're saying, that oftentimes we're not aware of it. The clue is really in how we feel. If you're not feeling, let's put it this way, when you're totally aligned, you'll feel like, hey, this feels so good, I'm ready for it right now. That's what it's like when you're on Christmas Eve waiting for Christmas Day and you know what's about to show up. That's kind of where you'll be at. If you're not quite there, explore why. Is it because you believe you're not good enough, you can't sustain it, or there aren't the right people out there, or I've even worked with clients who say that they don't. There's no single men where they live, and it could be like certain places in America. And what I say to them is this: the universe will. That's not your job to work out the how. You take care of the energy and the beliefs and so on, and the universe will do it. Because when someone says there aren't single men in my location, what I often say to them is, look, if you get your energy right, what will happen is the right man will come into your town or whatever, or you might go somewhere, or you might both meet somewhere else just without knowing each other. You might meet in a bookshop just nonchalantly, and he'll ask you out on a date, and it'll go from there. So you don't need to worry about the how, because if you try to figure out the how too much, you can tangle yourself up, thinking like, well, it's not out there, there's no one in my town. You're just taking yourself out of your flow over it. So just tell yourself, it's out there. I just need to get into a good feeling place about it. I want to feel excited. I want to feel thrilled about being in love. I want to wake up next to a man, etc., etc. And so how do you want to be? Get into the energy of it, and then as you build that, the universe will reflect that more and more, and you'll start to then maybe bump into people who are in great relationships. You'll start to see TV programs or find articles about having great relationships, so you'll start to reflect that back. If you're going through a vibe of distrust, you'll start to see that. So it's all a reflection of where we're at.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I believe our minds and our beliefs are so incredibly powerful, and I think some of these beliefs that we form, like there's no good men in my city, state, or country, we've heard this before. If that's the belief, then you're going to continue to see evidence of that, and that will continue to strengthen that belief. And then we get into this, what I call confirmation bias, where we started with an original belief that was false to begin with, but we've added all this evidence to it, to the point that it can be difficult to see anything else without getting to the bottom of that and releasing that belief. So it's really powerful, and it can work in both directions is kind of my point, right?
Exactly. Yeah, confirmation bias, exactly. You're just reinforcing your own beliefs, just like the woman I mentioned who said, well, all men are not trustworthy. And of course, she wanted to have a soulmate. Her words were, Hemal, I want to attract a soulmate. Can you help me? And men aren't trustworthy. It's like, how do you bring that two together? So we had to deal with that. It reminds me of a story where a few years ago I worked with a woman. She was probably in her late 40s at the time. She'd been married, didn't last very long. She had a daughter, and she said to me, Hemal, I've never had a relationship last more than a year. And she'd been looking everywhere. She was quite successful in her field, including the spiritual field. She was doing a lot of work in that field. So she knew this stuff, but it wasn't coming together for her. So I worked with her very, very briefly, very, very quickly actually, and I noticed she had some conflicts, and I helped her with it. And then what happened was, about 3 weeks later, she met a guy, and then they started dating. And what happened was, weeks went by, months went by, and she said, this is working out really well. And so one of the things was that she wanted to travel, and she kept attracting men that didn't want to travel, and not only didn't want to travel, they would put her off traveling because they didn't want to travel. So she would attract the wrong sort of men in that respect. So I helped to heal that conflict and deal with it. She was then attracting. She then attracted this guy. They were traveling together. They were starting to invest in real estate together, and they moved in together. And they then moved in together. They went beyond their first year, which is the longest relationship that she's ever had, and also that he'd ever had. Now it's about 5-6 years on. They're happily in a relationship. And like I said, 5-6 years on, they've parented various pets together. They travel. They invest in real estate. So again, this is the real sort of the funny thing about this. She said, and you know what, Hemal? All these years, he was right on my doorstep. He lived not too far away from where I live, and I'd searched everywhere for meeting the right guy, she said. And again, it's just when we get the energy right, and she said he was just literally, I think, maybe not literally down the road, but very, very close to where she lived, basically. So again, just an example of it can be right in front of us and us not see it because just what we're aligned to. It's like the analogy I say, it's like when you're at a dining table and you ask for the salt cellar and it's right in front of you, but you just totally overlook it. When we adjust our filters, we start to recognize what we already have and what we can have.
Yeah, that's a great story. Thank you for sharing that. So one thing I wanted to ask you about that I think comes up a lot too, and I want to get your thoughts on this, is I think there is a sense or a feeling for so many people of unworthiness. So like we have desires, we have things we hope for, but on some level we feel unworthy of having that. And I think sometimes that's hard to tap into and connect with sometimes as well. We don't always recognize that that's happening, but again, this is something that sometimes runs underneath the surface, or sometimes we are aware of it.
Yeah.
And I don't know, I think in some cases that stems back to childhood wounds or things like that, but what about this whole unworthiness piece? How can we work with that? Because I think it's all interrelated, but it's something that shows up often enough that I wanted to ask you about it.
That's a good question. It can also tie into self-love and self-worth and so on, essentially. So oftentimes, we were saying, you were asking earlier, like, how do people know about this stuff? Because it's quite subconscious. So it's just like this. If we have an unworthiness thing going on or not deserving thing going on, it could just be that we don't feel excited about relationships. We don't feel hopeful about it because on some level, we don't feel worthy of it. Maybe we regret certain choices we've made in relationships. Maybe it goes back to childhood. So again, explore how you feel about relationships, and that's a clue first of all. But in terms of how do we deal with it, so if let's say we're aware that, okay, for some reason I don't quite value myself, or maybe I'm not worthy of a nice man or a good man or whatever, or I can't be happy. If that's, again, it can be phrased in different ways. Maybe you don't think you can be happy or whatever it might be. So I would say, how do you know? Okay, in terms of the worthiness thing, just ask that question, how do I know I'm not worthy? And again, the thing is, how do I know that I might not even be worthy? So we're not even saying that you're not worthy, but even the might question, even if there's a hesitation about your worthiness, go for it, basically. Don't just hesitate. So even if there's like a slight hesitation about maybe not being totally worthy, explore why. So how do I know, or how might I know? And then you might say, oh, well, I regret certain choices I made in my past. Okay, so how does that mean that you can't have what you want? I mean, does everyone who makes certain choices in their life mean that they can't have what they want? I mean, people do make choices. Maybe because of the choices you've made, you can have what you want. Maybe it's because of that experience, you can have even more of what you want. Sometimes it might be, oftentimes when I work with clients and I ask that question, they'll say something like, goes back to, like you said, childhood. Sometimes it might be father type dynamics sort of thing. Their father maybe always, they felt they never deserved their father's attention, or their father never gave it. Maybe their father was withdrawn, so they took it personally and thought maybe there's something not right with them. So it might be their father wasn't always there for them or affectionate in a particular way. And it might be that the father was just doing what he could. Maybe he was busy trying to make a living or doing something else, and it was nothing deliberate on his part. But the individual felt, maybe I'm not good enough, or I'm not lovable because my father didn't give me the attention that I think I deserve. So again, there's an expectation they had as a child, but it doesn't mean that human being, their father, knew what they wanted and could have fulfilled it necessarily. So again, there's a bit of a mismatch going on, a miscommunication going on, and which then when we're little, we kind of subconsciously assume, maybe I'm not lovable, or maybe I'm not good enough, and so we then carry that forward out of a misunderstanding, essentially. So it's always useful to identify what that's about, and when we clear that up, then all sorts of things happen. Of course, not just romantically, but financially and other areas of our life, because again, we tend to attract the finances that reflect our level of value, our level of worth. So that's what I would say. Explore what's this about? How do I know? Sometimes it could be about comparison. So it might be that you're comparing yourself to others, and so it might not be about the past, but it might be that you're comparing yourself to others. I'm not as attractive as him or her or whatever, and so on and so on. Okay, but so what? Maybe there's someone who's absolutely perfect for you that's not right for them either, sort of thing. So again, it could be about stuff that's happening in our lives. It could be about things that we're comparing elsewhere. And again, if we're comparing elsewhere, why do you need to compare elsewhere when you've got your own path, you've got your own abundant universe? Remember what we said earlier a few times, the universe is abundant. So they can have what they want, but you can as well. And it might be someone very different for you as for them. That might be perfect for you and someone else perfect for them. So it's an abundant universe, and focus on your own path, your own energy, rather than, the key thing is the key thing is not taking yourself out of your flow. That's what people often tend to do. It's like, I'm not worthy because of that, or I'm not worthy because of that. We will use anything to make a meaning. Instead, turn it around to make anything mean that you are lovable, that you are worthy, that it is coming into your life. It's inevitable. It's not just coming into your life, it's unstoppable. Again, how does that feel? That's where you're going to move towards, where you feel something's inevitable, unstoppable. You're going to have it. You're going to have what you want, and it's on its way. There's and everything that you're getting now, including this conversation, the insights that come in your own mind, everything else that happens is all guiding you towards it. So these are all the steps that are taking you there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree with that. That was very beautifully said. And it seems to me that there's a piece here that's also maybe worth mentioning, which is forgiveness, self-forgiveness and forgiving of others. It seems like that's a real key in being able to be ready and open to receive, because I feel like as long as we are blaming ourselves or blaming others, or are caught up in feelings of anger or hurt or pain, it's hard to be fully open and ready to receive these things. And I find in my own life, and I think with many of my clients, the hardest person to forgive is ourselves for our real or perceived mistakes.
Yeah, that's totally true. And as you were saying that, I was thinking oftentimes, it's hurt, for example, where they're hurt by another, so they find it hard to forgive someone else, for example, and then, of course, forgiving themselves. Yeah, sometimes they might forgive someone else, but they might not forgive their own part in terms of whatever occurred, sort of thing. So it's about totally resolving it. Because, again, if you're carrying this, even a fraction of it, that's still even a fraction holding you back from the energy of creating what you want, sort of thing. Think about it this way. If you're with the love of your life, your husband, your long-term partner, that you've got what you want, okay, will you be thinking about any of this? Will any of this matter at that point? So that's the energy, that's the barometer. When you're in what you want, okay, so right now, if you imagine you're in the relationship that you want, will any of that matter? It won't, will it? In the right relationship, none of that will matter. So that's the clue as to which direction you want to go in. In terms of actual forgiveness, so when we hold someone else, when we blame someone else, sure, we'll get hurt, etc., etc. But the thing is, we're then giving away our power. We're in a sense, we're giving rent. We're letting someone rent in our psyche. Essentially, we're allowing them to stay in there because we've not let that go. So you're not doing it for their sake. You're doing it for your own sake. Sometimes, some people might have a protection issue. They might say, well, if I forget that happened, or rather, I need to hold on to that to protect me from it happening again, sort of thing. So it could be that you just need to move away from a particular person. It could be that. But generally, you want to let go of things. So sometimes people will say they choose not to let go of things because of protection and fear. Again, that's protection and fear, though. Subconsciously, you're still holding on to something because you're scared. So you want to resolve it. You want to trust that, hey, I've learned from that. I've dealt with it. I'm going to move on to better things, and I can totally let go of that now. Because again, whilst at the back of your mind, I mean, you can learn from it. You can make different choices in the future. You're just letting go of the emotions is the key thing. So you may take certain lessons, certain wisdom from it. You may make different choices, so that will never happen again. But you want to let go of the emotions of it. You don't really need to have the fear to fuel you, because that's still energetically there. So, and in terms of forgiving ourselves, so again, it's about regret, so guilt, especially if other people are involved, whether it's children or others. So explore what that's about. Sometimes we're not allowing ourselves to forgive ourselves because of guilt, whether we feel guilty for something or other. So again, holding on to guilt, holding on to pain for yourself is just holding you back. And whether it's if you've got children, whether it's your significant other that you have or will have, you're taking away energy from that dynamic, because it's subliminally, some of it is going toward past pain and not forgiving and letting go. So realize it's about totally letting that go. It's like having a blank canvas and moving forward. You'll then be more in the moment. You'll be more expressive. Your energy will be there. You'll be more you'll be giving your presence more to who you're with. So it'll be much more powerful energetically and romantically as well. So you totally need to let that go and then move forward. And the universe, like we said, is abundant. It'll create new experiences. But while you hold on to stuff, you're in a sense, you're diminishing your light and your energy to as fully the power that it can be. Basically, you can fully create powerful things very, very quickly in your life. It's just letting that stuff go, so you can let that happen more authentically and powerfully.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you for that. So I want to ask you one other question that just is a question that I think some people may have. Why is it that it seems that we manifest well in one area of our lives and we're blocked in another? So for example, perhaps there are women here on the call, and this was my own situation back when I was single, where I felt like I was manifesting well in the career and financial area of my life, but I felt like I wasn't manifesting well in my love life. And it would seem like these things would be more intertwined, but sometimes it feels like we can manifest really well in one area of life and not so well in another.
Yeah, and sometimes, it actually works the other way as well, where when we do manifest well in one area of our life, sometimes we manifest everywhere as well.
Right.
I'll explain that concept as well. I've kind of had that where you kind of just in the zone and all good things are happening, basically. So in terms of why sometimes we manifest in one and not another, so again, it depends on the entanglements we've got in different areas. So, we could do well in our career, but then if we've got, like some of the examples we said earlier, let's say someone's got some father issues with relationships sort of thing, in terms of not trusting men, or maybe their father didn't love them, so that could be why they don't feel worthy of attracting it, or maybe they feel I'm doing well and my career is my expression of who I am, whereas if I attract a man, that could affect it. That could maybe, he'll expect to have a family and I won't be able to express myself as fully, which will then affect my own self-worth, etc. So again, it's just how we are kind of wired up to those different areas of life. And it could, like we said, it could actually work the other way around though. So when someone's in a groove in one area, whether it's financially, career, etc., or romantically, they can hit like a slipstream where they're just totally in their groove, and they can attract all sorts of things. Now, the thing that sometimes happens is that all works very well. And let's say they do really well in their career and they're in their groove, and let's say any self-esteem stuff they had about relationships, they're not focusing on that now. They're focusing on how well they're doing in their life, financially, career-wise, how getting the promotion and all the stuff they're doing. So their self-esteem is flying high now. And so they're not focusing on the stuff that they were. So they're not, it might be there, it might be dormant, but they're not activating at the moment. So suddenly they've created the energy and the space for someone to come into their life. And now what happens, they're starting to date. They're starting to get intimate. Oh no, but now some of the old fears are coming up. And so they attracted someone because they were in their slipstream, and they created a space for good things to come in because they weren't focusing on some of the dormant fears that they used to have, which they used to focus on. But then they're now in that context of being in a relationship with someone, and whether it's emotional intimacy, physical intimacy, whatever it might be, some of the stuff triggers some of their fears around it. So now maybe some sabotaging behaviors come in because it's like, hang on, this is scary, this is not what I want. So that's why it's actually helpful to deal with this stuff. So the mechanics of why it happened that we attract good things when some other good things happen, or we don't, that's what's happening basically. But it's always still useful to handle whatever's there for us on a deeper level. It's like, even if you're doing really well in your career and you attract someone in your life, it's then doing what we said earlier. Well, what if I attract someone? What if I have a long-term relationship with them? How do I feel about it? So if it feels great, that's fine. But if suddenly there's some fears and some concerns, okay. But what if, like we said earlier, conflicts and whatever fears, then you want to address that. So you create more space for what's going to come in. One other thing I'll add to everything that we've said is this. Life is a journey, it's an evolution. Don't expect to be perfect now for everything for the rest of your life. It's right. Like we've said, everything that you've been through so far in your life has brought you to this point. So it's a learning thing. So don't expect to be perfect for everything you're going to ever have in your life ever again, because there's going to be new things that will come into your life which will excite you, maybe stimulate you, and maybe even trigger you at times, or things that come up within you. That's all useful. So everything that's got you to this point has been part of your evolution, as is where you are now and the next things that come in. So it's all good. You win anyway. Whatever happens, you're going to win in terms of your own evolution. And then when you're on the right path, the right things will come in and stay there as well, basically. So this is all useful in that sense.
Yeah. Well, that was amazing. This was a really wonderful conversation. I really appreciate you, and I really appreciate your energy and your generosity. I know you're really giving from the heart. I mean, we can not only hear you, but we can feel you. And I really appreciate that.
And I just got excited, and I just started talking away with what you've mentioned. So thank you for everything that you've shared as well. It just got me very excited, and just thank you. And I just went with it. And I hope that's been very, very valuable to our viewers.
I believe that it will be, and I'm really grateful to you. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Michelle. Thank you.
And ladies, we both want to thank you for your presence here, for your participation, and for your commitment to have an amazing life and amazing love. And we are both sending you lots of love and many blessings, and hoping you'll join us for more. Bye-bye for now.